Okay, we are now live.
Great. All right. Good afternoon and welcome everybody to the first Public Works Committee meeting of 2021. A banner moment here. I am joined by my colleagues, council members Lee, O'Farrell, De Leon, and Koretz. But to prove that, Mr. Espinosa, would you please call the roll?
Yes. Councilmember Bloomfield.
Bloomfield present.
Councilmember Lee.
Present.
Councilmember De Leon.
Present.
Yes.
I'm here.
Thank you. Councilmember O'Farrell.
Present and proven.
And Councilmember Koretz.
I am here.
So all the members are present and we have a quorum.
Great. We've got some big items moving through, but mostly it's just getting those things started. So it's before we move to public comment on all items, I wanted to let you know, colleagues, I'm going to ask that we continue item 11 to a future meeting. This has to do with a project in my district, and the community is sort of getting together on it. So one more week will make a difference. So we're going to continue that item without objection, and we can move directly to public comment. Mr. Espinosa, if you'd let us know if we have public commenters and explain the rules.
Thank you. And for the city attorney that's present, did you want to mention something before we had public comment today?
Yes, this is Robert Malowitz with the City Attorney's Office. Item number 14, I understand there might be a technical amendment to the ordinance, and it might be best to make that proposed amendment before public comment, so the public can comment on it as amended.
Great. I'm happy to do that. It's my understanding legally, though, in committee we don't have to do that because there's still a bite at the apple in council, but I think it is a good pattern and practice to always do that as when we have substantive amendments. So would you like to read the amendment into the record, Mr. Espinosa?
Yes, I believe this is only for item number 14, and the city attorney has requested the following amendment. For amendment section 63136B.
One second, we're still getting a lot of feedback. If anyone who's not speaking could put their mute on, that would prevent the feedback, I hope. Go ahead. You can start again.
Yes, this is for only item number 14, and the city attorney has requested the following amendment. To amend section 63.136B, and number 1 would be to actively engaging in the boating activity of moving a boat into and out of water from public boat launch facility or private dock with the dock owner's authorization, moving a boat from a designated walkway or exiting from a boat onto a designated walkway.
Mr. Bloomfield, you're on mute.
Thank you. You missed my words of wisdom. I was saying that thank you for reading that amendment in. There was also an amendment on item number 1, and for good pattern and practice to make note of that prior to public comment. It's less substantive, but basically on item 1, the amendment is going to ask to include a report back on the efforts and resources needed to further update the system, the Public Works reporting system software. So that is going to be an amendment and report back on that one as well. With that, if we could open up public comment.
And let me read the rules for the public comment, which is members of the public who would like to offer public comment on the items listed on the agenda should call 1-669-254-5252 and use meeting ID number 160-073-2397 and then press pound. Press pound again when prompted for a participant ID. Once admitted into the meeting, press *9 to request to speak.
And actually, the other thing I'll mention before the public comment come on, we do also have a what I consider a non-substantive amendment in item 7 as well, which is also, we mentioned the 14, item 7 is also about a report back. So, I'm sorry, go ahead and you could add on, we could hear the first speaker.
And just to clarify, I believe for item number 7, in the preamble of the motion, it does state that the roadway, affected roadway, is a private street, and the Bureau of Engineering wanted to correct the record and state that it is a public street.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, that is true. There's nothing wrong with that's also a technical amendment, but great. So let's bring on the public comment.
Caller with the last 4 digits, 4708. Please press *6 to unmute yourself. Please state your name and the item you'd like to speak on.
Good afternoon. My name is Eric Nishizawa, and I would like to speak in favor of item number 5.
Great, you have 1 minute.
Thank you for this opportunity to rise and support naming the intersection of First and San Pedro Rose Ochi Square. Rose was a dear friend and a leader in the Japanese American community. She was a founding member of the Japanese American Bar Association, which grew to become a leader in the California and national legal communities. During her career, she served as Director of Criminal Justice in Mayor Bradley's administration, Assistant Attorney General in the Clinton administration, and a member of the Los Angeles Police Commission. She also helped found and then served as founding Executive Director of the California Forensic Science Institute. Throughout, Rose took the time to mentor many a young person, and she taught all of us who served with her how to zealously advocate for a position, strongly armed with both the merits and a bright and cheery attitude. I served with Rose for several years on the National Japanese American Memorial Foundation's Board of Governors and considered myself lucky to have been one of those who could call Rose a friend. I'm grateful to Rose and to the other founding members of the Japanese American Bar Association for the opportunity to have served as its president in 2001 and as the current co-chair of its Business Lawyers Group. Rose has been a pioneer in the Japanese American community. I think that is fitting for our city to honor Rose by naming one of the gateways to Little Tokyo the sentimental heart of LA's Japanese American community after Rose. We should all have a lot of Rose Ochi's fight and cheer in our hearts. Finally, I'd like to thank Councilmember De Leon for his leadership and for his spearheading this recognition of such a great leader in our community. Thank you very much.
Caller with the last 4 digits, 9967. Please press *6 to unmute yourself. Please state your name and the item you'd like to speak on.
Yes, this is Bill Fujioka, the former CAO for the city and CEO for LA County. I'm currently on the Board of Trustees for the Japanese American National Museum. I'd like to speak on item number 5.
You have 1 minute.
Thank you. I feel the defining criteria for this honor should be the impact of the honoree's life on the citizens of Los Angeles. Rose Ochi clearly meets this criteria. As co-counsel of the historic Serrano versus Priest case, advocacy changed how public schools are funded, not only in California, but across the nation. This case improved the funding and quality of education for current and future generations from underserved communities. Her work on the Redress and Reparations Bill in declaring Manzanar a national historic site helped address the atrocities inflicted on the Japanese American community during World War II. Her work with the Carter and Clinton administration impacted both the immigration and criminal justice policies for the nation. And her work during the Bradley and Hahn administrations results in significant improvements to the city's criminal justice policy. Lastly, her mentoring of young attorneys and other civil servants continue to impact the lives of many. Her mentees continue her legacy of fighting for the less fortunate. Ms. Ochi clearly meets our criteria for this honor, and I urge your support. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Caller with the last 4 digits, 9510. Please press *6 to unmute yourself. Please state your name and the item you'd like to speak on.
Okay, thank you. Yes, I'm calling about item number 14. This is Mark Galanti. I'm president of the Venice Canals Association. And our goal was to protect the banks, the salt bush that protects the barriers, and the wildlife that comes to the birds that come to the Venice canals. And I think the new changes may meet that, although I haven't read them. It was just done by audio, and so I haven't seen them. But I believe the city attorney has attempted to make sure that the banks and the salt bush were protected with the new language. And until I see it, I can't really give you yay or nay on this. But I wanted to just thank them for trying to make sure they protect the birds and wildlife. And finally, the other goal, which is not part of this motion, is to try to clarify the because this is a residential area, RW1, to make sure we get clarification on that there's no commercial or rentals allowed in this area. And so it was our hope to get that included as part of this motion. So anyway, that's my comment right now. So thank you for listening.
Thank you.
Caller with the last four digits, 3707. Please press *6 to unmute yourself. Please state your name and the item you'd like to speak on.
Gomez, agenda item 2, council file number 18-1113.
You have 1 minute.
Councilmember DeLeon, I am currently a recipient of your Council District 14. Previously, before the recipient, I was the Council District 1. I've been there for 18 years now. And the issue is that
I'm having trouble hearing you, caller. Can you speak?
Does that help?
Try it again. You can get started over again because we didn't hear a word you said. Go ahead. Start again.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, much better. Go ahead.
Thank you so much. Leticia Gomez, item number 2, Council File 18-1114, Councilmember De Leon, welcome. I am in your Council District now, previously in Council District 1 before the redistricting, and I have been trying for the 17 years that I've been there to get my streets paved because, thank goodness now, I can finally do a junior ADU downstairs of my home to help seniors and also a 2-story ADU on the backside of my property. The issue with not having not only a street but also not having sewer connection is that I'm not able to get trash pickup. I'm not able to get U.S. mail. It's just so many items that I would appreciate speaking with someone in your office that maybe can assist me, especially now when everything is so needed as far as housing. Pass my time, please.
Thank you.
Okay.
Caller with the last four digits, 0966. Please press *6 to unmute yourself. Please state your name and the item you'd like to speak on.
On item number 2, I'm Joyce Schmiesing, homeowner on
You have 1 minute.
Street in Omaha Heights and CD 14. I've sent you my comments that are on the website, and I've also sent comments to each of you individually. So I ask you refer to that. I've been a homeowner since '87, and the streets haven't been maintained and they haven't been repaired. The neighbors have been trying to get the streets repaired. They're in terrible shape. They've been trying since 1973. I've been trying since '87. I hired a consultant about 3 years ago to try to help me on this project. Anyway, we need the streets repaired. I'm paying property tax and sales tax and gas tax, and the streets aren't being repaired. They're dangerous. There's a sinkhole outside of my house. There's few berms, and there's a hump down the middle of the road. Some of the roads are washing away. It's unsafe.
Thank you. Caller with the last four digits, 0966. Please press *6 to unmute yourself. Please state your name and the item you'd like to speak on.
There's a hump down the middle of the road. Some of the roads are washing away. It's unsafe.
That's your time. Thank you. Caller with the last four digits, 4658. Please press star 6 to unmute yourself. Caller with the last four digits, 4658. Please press star 6 to unmute yourself. Please state your name and the item you'd like to speak on. That caller has left the meeting.
Okay, next caller.
Caller with the last four digits, 3434. Please press star 6 to unmute yourself. Please state your name and the item you'd like to speak on.
Hello, my name is Rick Ladati, and I'm commenting on item number 2. I am the person that initiated this motion back with then Councilman Huzar back in 2018 on behalf of Ms. Schmeezing, who had just spoke. At the time of the discussion with Mr. Huzar, the road work was specifically about what was happening in Omaha Heights. This report that's part of this today is gone into something much more massive than what we discussed originally for this motion that was voted on back in 2019. My comments, I did put some comments to the web, but they haven't seemed to be on there. But I sent them to you, each councilman individually, pointing out some of the problems with this report. When we originally spoke to Adel, and I'm going to mispronounce his last name, Street Services, he told me directly that this was going to get done. But this report is now what we're looking at is the rehashing of the same excuses that I've heard over and over again since I started working on this. We have been trying, Ms. Schmeezing and myself, been trying to get a meeting with Councilman DeLeon, but it looks like we're being ignored on this. And so I want to hope that the committee will move forward with these repairs in Omaha Heights and focus specifically on what this motion was originally about. Thank you.
Thank you. Caller with the last four digits, 2245. Please press star 6 to unmute yourself. Please state your name and the item you'd like to speak on.
Hi, my name is Charles Wheeler, and I would like to speak on item number 10.
You have 1 minute.
Hi, thank you guys. My name is Charles, and again, I'm the president of the McCoy HOA, a brand new housing community that's only 2 years old here in Harbor City in McCoy. Myself and the residents, the church and the preschool would like to thank you guys for taking the time to consider us building a fence for the community safety and protection. We really appreciate it if you guys look at everything and make a good judgment call on approving this for us. Thank you.
Thank you. Caller with the last four digits, 8383. Please press star 6 to unmute yourself. Please state your name and the item you'd like to speak on.
My name is Brian Quito, and I'd like to speak on item 5.
1 minute. Go ahead, you have 1 minute.
My name is Brian Quito. I am the owner of Fugetsu Confectionery in Little Tokyo. We are the oldest business at 117 years running. I'm also the president of the Little Tokyo Public Safety Association here on 1st Street. My comment is I feel it's very fitting to recognize Rose Ochi for her leadership and paving the way for the Japanese American here in LA. I want to also commend the idea of naming that the square of intersection of San Pedro and 1st after her, and I think it's very fitting. I also want to thank Councilman De Leon for initiating this for us. Thank you.
Thank you. Caller with the last four digits, excuse me. Caller with the last four digits, 7800. Please press star 6 to unmute yourself. Last four digits, 7800. Please press star 6 to unmute yourself. This caller is not responsive. Caller with the last four digits, 0887. Please press star 6 to unmute yourself. The last four digits. Please state your name and the item you'd like to speak on.
Hi, James. Public comment. I'd like to make public comment about the investigators that go out for the vendors that don't have permits, and that the areas that they're placed in, a lot of these vendors are very unsafe, and it could cause some real harm to them if a car were to fly into that area where they're standing and a lot of people are standing. And nothing in the ordinance, I was told, allows them to remove them from unsafe areas, or even if they're violating federal law through the ADA, that they cannot be told to move from their location. So that ordinance really needs to be looked at and allow them to really inspect the areas and make it safe for everybody. Thank you.
Thank you. Caller with the last four digits, 4658. Please press star 6 to unmute yourself. Please state your name and the item you'd like to speak on.
Hi, my name is Darlene Kuba, item number 5.
You have 1 minute.
I wanted to provide some information to support this amazing honor for Rose Ochi. Rose was a teacher, a lawyer, a policymaker, and a civil rights activist. She had a fierce commitment to justice and public service that was sparked when she and her family and other Japanese Americans were incarcerated during World War II. After receiving her bachelor and master's degree in education, Rose was first a teacher in Boyle Heights. However, the East Los Angeles walkouts in 1968 by Latino students resulted in her decision that a law degree would be a better path to fight for social change. Following her graduation from Loyola Law School, she worked for the USC Western Center on Law and Poverty, where she served as co-counsel on the landmark education reform case, Serrano versus Priest. This lawsuit resulted in the adoption of a more equitable education funding system. Rose then worked with Mayor Tom Bradley for over 2 decades as a director of criminal justice planning, where she developed programs and policies that had a huge impact on underserved communities. In 1979, President Carter appointed Rose to the Immigration and Refugee Policy Commission. And in 1997, President, I'm almost done. President Clinton made her the first Asian American woman to be the Assistant Attorney General, and she advised him on drug policy and race relations. And Mayor Jim Hahn in 2001 appointed her to the Police Commission. And I believe that she's deserving of this honor, and I want to thank Councilman Kevin De Leon for introducing this motion. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Caller with the last four digits, 4499. Please press star 6 to unmute yourself. Please state your name and the item you'd like to speak on.
Mike Hernandez, item number 5.
You have 1 minute.
Yeah, I'm calling also in support of the Rose Ochi Square. I just wanted to say that as a council member, I got a chance to work with Rose. I got to see her activities on the police commission under Tom Bradley. And she was a civil rights champion, not only for the Japanese community, but all communities in Los Angeles. Rose was one of the proud angels of this city, and I strongly support this motion, and I thank Kevin De Leon for introducing it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Ron?
Caller with the last four digits, 2245. Please press star 6 to unmute yourself. That caller left. Caller with the last four digits, 7800. Please press star 6 to unmute yourself. Please state your name and the item you'd like to speak on.
Sean McDowell, item number 5.
You have 1 minute.
Well, I was fortunate to meet and work with Rose when she ran for the Board of Trustees for the LA Community College District. She was an ideal candidate, dedicated teacher, a champion of social justice, and she's most importantly, she cared about our students who are mostly underrepresented, low-income students of color, most of whom are the first to go to college and their family. It was a great campaign. I enjoyed that, which I don't always enjoy campaigning. But unfortunately, she didn't win, but she won our hearts over. And she provided leadership in so many issues, standing up for the people who needed to help the most, arguing for criminal justice reform, reducing gang violence, community policing, immigration reform, and so forth. I just want to say that it's ironic that when she was told not to go to college, that she would be a good secretary. Secretary of State? Yes. Labor Secretary? Sure. But I don't think that's what the high school counselor meant. But seriously, she ranks at the level of the many Californians that President Biden is bringing now into the cabinet in Washington. So Rose lived a great life. She made a difference wherever she went. How wonderful we'll be able to walk downtown on a busy block, Rose Ochi Square. Thank you for putting this forward, Councilmember DeLone, and please support it. Thank you.
Thank you. There are no more speakers.
Great. Thank you very much. Thank you to all the speakers who called in. So what I'd like to do now is approve a number of these items, ideally on consent, but I'm going to run through the items that I want to do on consent, and any of my colleagues who wish to call something special or take it off consent, feel free. So what I'm going to recommend is that we move item number 1, items 3 through 10, and items 12 through 14, but carefully to note that for items 1, there is an amendment that we will be including in the vote, which is what was read before. I therefore move that the Bureau of Engineering, in coordination with the Department of Transportation, be instructed to report back on the efforts and resources needed to further update and refine the existing PWRS software to create a public-facing web portal that makes it easy for the public to know when sidewalks and streets are closed. And item 7, as was discussed, the preamble of the motion states the affected roadway is a private street, and the Bureau of Engineering wants to correct the record and state that it is a public street, so we will indicate that as an amendment. And on item 14, as was discussed, City Attorney mentioned to amend Section 63.136B, actively engaging in the boating activity of moving a boat into and out of the water from public boat launch facility or private dock with the dock owner's authorization, moving a boat from a designated walkway or exiting from a boat onto a designated walkway. That's basically to make it very clear that we're only talking about being able to launch from an actual dock, public or a private dock, and not anywhere that you want in order to protect. So with that, colleagues, unless there is an objection, I'm going to take items 1, 3 through 10, and 12 through 14 on consent. Seeing no objection, that'll be the order, and if we can call the roll for that block of votes.
Yes, Mr. Chair. Councilmember Blumenfield.
Blumenfield, aye.
Councilmember Lee.
Aye.
Councilmember De Leon.
Aye.
Councilmember O'Farrell.
Aye.
And Councilmember Koretz.
Aye.
Those items on consent pass, and I did want to make an announcement for item number 11, which will be the continued vacation. I just wanted to announce that notification letters went out on that item, and that the item will not be heard in full council on Tuesday, March 16th, 2021, because it was continued.
Thank you for that. And now we're going to move to item 2 for discussion. And this item refers back to the motion that was mentioned that Mr. Huizar and Monica Rodriguez had done, but it also is referenced back to a motion that I did dealing with streets out of public use. It's merging the two together. And just for a little background, for a long time in my district, when residents on some of the hillside streets were asking for services with these streets that were in terrible condition, they were told that they didn't live on a public street. And we started hearing this time and time again. It turned out that in the early 1900s, 1936, most of them, the city removed substandard streets from public use. So we had all these streets that were removed. And the natural features of our city can be certainly a challenge when addressing infrastructure, whether it's the streets with substandard widths, curbs, or gutters, or the age of the streets that creates the biggest concerns. We need to find solutions. And fortunately, these streets have been brought back into our network as we went through a whole thing, removing those streets that were out of public use, putting them back into public use. However, the real work now begins to figure out how do we use the limited resources that we have to make improvements. And that's what this item is about. And so at this time, I'd like to ask Sean Yapremian from BOE and Ada Valencia and Keith Mose from Streets LA to present their report. So welcome.
Thank you, honorable council members, fellow staff. This is Sean Yapremian, Bureau of Engineering, Valley District Office. As Council Member Bob Blumenfeld mentioned, that there were 2 different council files, Council File 171143 and Council File 181114. And really, in analyzing both of them, our game plan to address both of them were very similar. That's why we decided to combine the both of them and respond back together in one report. Council File 171143 was regarding the assessment of withdrawn streets and the reinstatement procedure for such streets. And Council File 181114 was a comprehensive list of all hillside streets which cannot be resurfaced in the current condition, and to develop a work plan to address them. So first, to start with Council File 171143. Because of the council file, there was ordinance number 186020, which was adopted March 6, 2019, which returned 278 street segments back into public use. The council file instructed BOE and Streets LA to take a look at each of these locations. So we ended up forming a task force comprised of both staff from BOE and BSS, and we put the foots in the ground and we went out there and investigated all 278 locations. Investigating the locations, we found that 118 of them in their current condition, it was feasible to be able to maintain. But unfortunately, 160 of them we weren't able to maintain, or we felt like we couldn't recommend to maintain them. Some of the factors that we took into account were the width of the existing roadway. If the streets are too narrow, generally creates a visibility issue, and it's difficult for the larger construction equipment from BSS to be able to navigate their way up there to maintain the street. So that was one of the challenges. The second challenge was potentially unstable hillside slopes, where we'll have concern taking the larger vehicles up there to do a grind overlayer to repair the street, because we don't have the complete understanding of the integrity of the slope adjacent to the roadway. And then finally, one of the most important items that we look for when we're doing these investigations is whether or not there's a presence of flow control. So generally, we look to see if the street has an established curb and gutter ideally. If not, it's an AC berm or an AC curb. But generally, our streets are designed with a crown to transfer the water to the edge of the roadway to concentrate it, keep it within the curb and gutter, and to safely navigate it to catch basin. So streets that don't have that feature, the water isn't concentrated and generally just goes to the path of least resistance. And if we put asphalt down, it'll create a potential liability where properties that weren't expecting or experiencing any water before could now be experiencing nuisance water or rainfall water that we don't want to create that concern. One item that we had mentioned in the report that I wanted to highlight here was that per the California Streets Highway Code, no city shall be held liable for failure to maintain any road until it's been accepted into the city street system. And how we interpret that is the roadway built according to an index set of plans reviewed and approved by the city engineer, and was a construction inspected by Bureau of Contract Administration? If that's not the case, then we consider it that it's not a street that the city maintains. However, that doesn't prevent the city from voluntarily wanting to maintain such streets. Regarding general hillside streets, per the baseline hillside ordinance, the minimum roadway width is 20 feet. And I'm just going to mention there's different classifications within the hillside. There's a limited hillside local street, which asks for a 28-foot roadway, and really that has parking. You're allowed to have parking on one side of the road. You have a regular local hillside street, which is a 36-foot paved roadway. And we have a collector hillside street, which is a 44-foot paved roadway. And the reason why I'm mentioning this is because of the 118 segments that we identified as can be maintained. There were several of the roadways that were actually less than the 20 feet, and they didn't meet current city standards. However, because there was flow control and the slopes were stable, we were able to identify in the streets that, yes, we can in fact maintain them today. Also, one of the items in Council File, the 171143, it asks to identify private funding sources. And what I want to mention is if generally it doesn't happen often, but when you have a tract, when you have a parcel in the hillside and the developer, the owner of the lot wants to subdivide that lot into 5 individual lots or greater, they generally have to go to city planning, which imposes conditions of approval on them. And one of the conditions of approval would be to improve the roadway adjacent to the parcel to the current city standards. So that's one that we see often, where they would have to hire an engineer. They would come in with a B permit. It's reviewed by our office. Contract administration inspects it, and finally it's accepted into the city maintenance schedule for streets LA to maintain. Also, Parcel Maps is very similar to tract maps, except that original lot is divided to 4 lots or less. One that we see often in the hillside is when a single-family home is subject to the hillside ordinance, and if the development that they're improving on their parcel is subject to it, and the roadway adjacent to their parcel is less than 20 feet, then they're required to hire an engineer, develop a set of plans, and improve that said roadway to 20 feet along their frontage only, and not to the boundary of the hillside generally if the ZA waives that requirement. But again, that only requires them to do the improvement to the frontage of their parcel. The final item I want to mention is there's street assessment projects that homeowners that are within the same segment could file for a petition with the city. An assessment district's identified. The city designs it. It is a rather lengthy process, but ultimately the city designs it, delivers the project, and the cost of that is assessed to each property owner, and it's amortized over a 1 to 10 year period. Now, regarding Council File 181114, now this wanted, as I mentioned in the beginning, comprehensive list of all hillside streets which cannot be resurfaced in current conditions and develop a working plan to address them. We talked with Streets LA, and they provided us with a list of an additional 2,126 hillside streets that are currently not being maintained. That's in addition to the 278 that we initially talked about. That equates to 270 centerline miles, 148 of which are concrete, 111 are asphalt, and 11 miles of that is dirt. We did a very rough estimate talking to Streets LA also, and that could cost anywhere between $2 million to $10 million per mile. And a lot of that has to do with, the large difference there has to do with the need for retaining walls, constructing storm drains, and a lot of the times we don't have sufficient right-of-way, and that's to potentially acquire additional right-of-way. Scaling that to the 226 segments, we're looking anywhere between $540 million to $2.7 billion to address 270 miles. Now, our recommendation is, in looking at because when we are reviewing the locations that we can maintain or can't maintain, the ones that we identified as can maintain, we still notice that there could still be challenges with those streets, and we decided to look at all the hillside streets within the baseline hillside ordinance area. So we identified 12,400 segments that are found within it, and really we want to be able to investigate all 12,400 of them, not only just the 2,700, because substandard streets currently being maintained can be assigned a high priority for improvements due to other prioritization criteria such as emergency ingress during a fire. So we're recommending to establish a working group with staff from Bureau of Engineering, Streets LA, Fire Department, LA DOT, Bureau of Sanitation, and City Planning to work with council district offices to develop a recommended scope for a comprehensive study to address or assess all 12,400 hillside streets and prepare a cost estimate. We'd like to develop a priority system to rank the street segments by those that would provide the most general benefit if improved. We'll identify the parameters to develop a conformity index based on the following criteria: emergency access, existing roadway conditions, number of homes taking sole access from the segment, cost of improvements, ability for Streets LA to provide maintenance, ability for Bureau of Sanitation to provide public services, and finally, risk reduction and assessment. Due to the magnitude of the study, limited staffing, and the need for advanced innovative methods such as LIDAR, which is light detection and ranging surveying, DOE is recommending working with a local university to help us gather and assess the data. We believe that it'll be less costly to work with a university than to hire a consultant. And we know that they have the driving cutting edge technology to be able to help us out with what we need here. We've already been in preliminary discussions with the School of Engineering with UCLA in assessing, with UCLA, where they have experience to use autonomous robots and artificial intelligence to assess infrastructure. So BOE finally is recommending to report back in 120 days with details of the recommended study and associated funding request. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Any of our other speakers want to present or just be part of the Q&A? Okay. So Sean, thank you for that presentation. One couple of questions and a clarification to start. You talked about the streets that we can't maintain not being our responsibility, but for the streets that we've put back into public use, even if they can't be maintained, we still have that responsibility. We just don't have the funding at this point. Is that correct?
My understanding is, sorry, this is Sean again, Bureau of Engineering. My understanding is because the streets that we returned back into use, because they weren't built for an engineered plan, index set of plans, and because we don't have record of inspection from contract administration, then the city hasn't officially accepted the responsibility to maintain them. That's how we're interpreting it.
Does the city agree with that assessment? Because that's not quite how I understood it.
It could be a little bit more complicated. Responsibility to maintain a street may arise under different theories. So, for example, if a street exists on paper and no one is, there's no improvements on that, no one lives on it, it's just a street that exists on the map, and then that's probably the best situation for the city in terms of having no responsibility. However, if other streets exist physically, notwithstanding the fact that they haven't been accepted, and homes have been built, permitted by the city, and people reside there, then there can be obligations of the city that would arise to maintain at least some form of passability because people live there and there's homes there. And so the standard for that may be not up to the street and highway code, but if someone resides on a street, they've permitted single-family home, for example, an obligation could arise for the city to have to maintain that street, such as it is, in some passable condition. Otherwise, essentially, a home can become landlocked.
Well, and a step further, I mean, this is what I was hearing prior to me doing that ordinance, because weren't repairing any of these streets. Then we did the ordinance where we repealed all of the ordinances back in the 1930s, 40s, 50s that took those streets out of public use, thus by default putting them back into public use and subject, as I understand it, to all of the same responsibilities that we have for all of our streets. So I'm not sure why a street that's been taken out of public use and then that removal of public use was repealed, why that street has some sort of lesser priority or less advantage. That was the whole point of my repeal motion, was to bring those streets back into our system.
And that was certainly an important step in the process of getting these streets that were previously identified, those segments on, those old council actions that withdrew them from public use. Rescinding those ordinances was an important step. And it may be the case, and I don't know for certain, that would also open up potentially additional funding sources for the city to be able to then draw upon to do repairs on those streets. But as to the specific obligations for the city, it's difficult to generalize.
Okay.
I think that was but I think the prior action that is part of this council file was a very critical step in bringing these streets, back into a better condition.
Right. And I understand, we don't want to create false hope. If in the sense of, if these costs are between $540 and $2.7 billion to repair all of these streets, that's way more than a year's worth of budget, than 10 years worth of budget for this stuff. So, we're not going to be able to fix all of the streets that have been neglected, certainly overnight or this year or, anytime soon. But we're gonna slowly chip away at that, and that's my understanding, and that, it's my expectation too, in terms of the streets that have been brought out of public use that are put back in. They should not have a lesser standard by any means than any other street. The BOE and BSS, they conducted have they done any significant roadway improvements on residential hillside streets recently, over the last year or two? We know?
Yeah, I would defer. Are you referring to the 118 segments that we identified as maintainable, whether or not there's been any maintenance on those segments?
Yeah.
I would defer that to BSS.
Good afternoon. This is Aida with Street Renewal Division, and we do have some of the streets that were placed back in public use on our resurfacing program. So we have started paving some of those streets already.
Okay. Well, I'd love to see that. I'm eager to see these streets be brought back up. Now, in terms of the LiDAR stuff, is really exciting. That's a way that we can get some of this stuff. I love when we can harness the technology and make things happen. Have there been other cities that have done similar studies of hillside streets using LiDAR technology? Do we know?
No, I'm not aware of that. No, but that's something that I could definitely follow up on and report back.
Yeah, I would love. It's always great when we're leading the charge, and on so many things we are the innovator. But it's also good to know if it's been done successfully or if there are any issues. And the cost to maintain streets compared to the maintenance cost of non-hillside streets, they're much more expensive, right? What's the maintenance cost difference?
I have that number, but I need to look for it. But from my recollection, it was probably about half the cost for what it costs to improve a road or in the hillside area, because you don't have the obstacles of constructing a retaining wall or building a storm drain where you're going to have those challenges in the hillside. So I think it was about 50%, but I could verify right now.
Yeah, well, that's a similar ratio. It's 50% more there, but it's also, as you said, to build the street or to repair it goes from $1 million on the non-hillside to $2 million minimum on the hillside. So it's twice the cost. I've got some other questions, but I want to move around to members. Members, any other comments or questions? Mr. Kretz.
South Dakota, the land of the free. We're open for
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I wanted to thank you for focusing on this and bringing it forward. I just wanted to note, as I'm sure is the case for all council members representing hillside areas, we get a lot of complaints and concerns. The streets are already, in many cases, a little bit more dangerous because the streets are narrow, the streets are curved, and to add to that, the fact that they're in bad condition. So if we at least can have these rejoin the rest of the streets of the city family and be repaired with that same level of priority that we include other streets, I think that would be, in and of itself, a significant improvement. I recognize for us to fix all of these streets would wipe out our budget for many years to come, especially at a time when we're pretty broke as a city. But if we can start including these as our routine repairs and start to make some headway, I think that would be a great step forward.
Bob? Sorry, I was on mute. Mr. De Leon is next, and then Mr. O'Carroll.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Dr. Blumenfield, I appreciate you calling on me. I'd like to add a friendly amendment to the report to look at the feasibility of making streets one-way streets in order to minimize the right of acquisition, if it would be so accepted as a friendly amendment to the report.
I'm certainly open to it. Say it again. What do you want it to be?
A friendly amendment to the report to look at the feasibility of making streets one-way streets in order to minimize the right of acquisition.
To minimize the right of acquisition. I just don't understand that part, but I'm certainly open to the idea. So by making them one way, you have less acquisition?
Well, to be more specific, we'd have more acquisition. I wrote my notes down here. Let me just give you a little specifically. Implement one streets to to require less need to acquire private property for the two-way streets. So I want them to take a look at an assessment of one-way streets, so there doesn't have to be the acquisition of private property.
Okay. So I'm happy to accept that as a friendly amendment, and I just want to have it written in the right way. So a report back on the feasibility of
making streets one-way streets.
Making certain hillside
making streets one-way streets in order to minimize the right of way of acquisitions of private properties.
Okay, without objection, we can add that when we move into when we vote on that.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Chair, if I can make a friendly suggestion on that, it may be that the staff here, Street Services, Bureau of Engineering, will want to consult with the Department of Transportation to move forward on that feasibility issue concerning changing the streets from a two-way configuration to a one-way configuration. It would be my recommendation to tell DOE, go talk to DOT about it.
So to say, it would be Mr. De Leon's report with consultation to BOE and DOT.
That would be my recommendation.
Yeah, that makes sense. Mr. De Leon, is that okay with you?
Yeah, absolutely.
And that will be that amendment, which will include the DOT and BOE. Mr. O'Carroll.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I want to commend you for leaning in on an issue that has zero easy answers. And that's really a great thing for us to endeavor. We shouldn't ever just approach the easy stuff. We should approach the hard stuff. And as someone who has lots of hillside streets, many of them unimproved, and all the challenges that come with that, BOE certainly understands that issue. Streets LA certainly understands that issue. And I want to thank BOE and Streets LA for this comprehensive report and this inventory as they relate to both council files. So really, more than anything else, I just want to commend you, and I look forward to more information as it comes forward on how we approach and prioritize getting these streets resurfaced, because the residents along them justifiably want to access their own properties safely and without fear on a street that might crumble down the hillside. I could give you stories over the last couple of decades in the 13th District when I worked in the office of my predecessor. I was his public works deputy on hillside streets that were basically a collection of filled potholes. They were so degraded. And Streets LA, BSS then, certainly did not want to approach those streets at all for good reason. They wanted to run in the other direction. So it's always been a challenge addressing the condition of our hillside streets. So I look forward to doing anything I can in helping address this very challenging issue at the worst possible time fiscally. We've got challenges, but to all the residents who live on these hillside streets, just know that through the leadership of Mr. Blumenfield, we will keep working on solutions here. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Farrell. And part of the beauty of this is by partnering with the university and looking at using the technology, we can move forward on the assessments during this difficult economic time, and hopefully when things are better, be able to do more. Mr. Lee.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Hey, Sean, in this study, and I apologize if I missed it, are a lot of the streets included? Are they paper streets? Are they, streets that we're never going to use that we could possibly vacation over to the adjoining properties? Are they included in this number of streets?
Okay, the paper streets are included. Of the 278 locations that we investigated that were withdrawn, those aren't paper streets. Those are all improved streets, or improved to some extent. We had of for the second motion, the Council File 181114, 2,126 segments were identified for a total of 270 centerline miles. 11 miles of those were paper streets.
Got it. And are those being considered being given to adjoining properties? Are we going to use them, or are we just going to keep them for future use?
Yeah, we would have to identify the need for it, and we'll have to include
individually.
That. Yeah, to see whether or not it's something that we want to roll with it.
All right, thanks, Sean.
Thank you, Mr. Lee. Okay, so I'm going to, as we move forward on this issue, adopt the recommendations and to include Mr. De Leon's amendment that requests BOE in consultation with LADOT to report on the feasibility of making streets one-way streets to minimize the right-of-way acquisition of private properties. And I'm also going to ask that we, the conversation that we had, maybe want to do an additional report back as well, and a second amendment that would be to request the city attorney and instruct the Bureau of Engineering and Bureau of Street Services to report on which streets that had been previously removed from public use have been fully incorporated into the city street network and the steps necessary to incorporate the remaining streets. So with those two amendments, Mr. De Leon's and the amendment that I just added, I'd like us to vote on this, adopting the recommendation of the joint BOE report dated November 18th, 2020. And just if you could call the roll for that.
Yes, Councilmember Blumenfield.
Blumenfield, aye.
Councilmember Lee.
Aye.
Councilmember De Leon.
Aye.
Councilmember O'Farrell.
Aye.
And Councilmember Koretz.
Aye.
Item 2 passes as amended.
Are there any other items on the desk?
No, Mr. Chair, the desk is clear.
Great. Well, then that concludes this meeting. Thank you all for being part of it.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
This meeting is adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.